Hey y'all, thought we'd pop in today to talk about working with knit fabrics. Specifically, how to pin, or rather, not pin a pattern when you're cutting knits. If you've been sewing for a while and mostly working with woven fabrics, knit fabrics can feel like they're playing by an entirely different rulebook. They stretch, they drape, they shift if you so much as breathe on them wrong, and they absolutely refuse to behave the way crisp cotton or linen does. That's part of what makes them wonderful and part of what makes them frustrating. Knits are incredibly popular across fiber crafts. Whether you're a garment sewist, a knitter branching into sewing, a crocheter curious about finished garments, or even a cross-stitcher dabbling in apparel, chances are you've encountered jersey, interlock, rib knit, or some other stretchy fabric at some point. Understanding how these fabrics behave at the cutting stage can save you a lot of heartache later. One of the most common habits sewists bring with them from woven fabric is pinning pattern pieces directly onto the fabric. It's instinctive. It's what we've always done. Pattern down, pin through the layers, cut around the edges. Simple, right? Except knit fabrics don't always appreciate that treatment. Knit fabrics are constructed from interlocking loops rather than tightly woven threads. That looped structure is what gives knits their stretch and their drape. It's also what makes them vulnerable to damage. When you pass a pin directly through the fabric instead of between those loops, you risk breaking fibers and creating tiny tears that can turn into visible runs later. This is especially true with drapery knits like slinky knits, rayon jersey, or mat jersey. These fabrics are often lightweight, fluid, and designed to move beautifully on the body. Unfortunately, that same fluidity means they're less forgiving when punctured. One misplaced pin can leave a permanent mark that no amount of careful sewing will erase. Even if you manage to avoid visible damage, pinning through knits introduces another problem: shifting. Knit fabrics love to stretch unevenly. When you pin multiple layers together, the fabric can distort under the pin's pressure, especially if the weight of the pattern piece pulls in one direction. That distortion often shows up after cutting, when your pieces mysteriously suddenly don't match. If you've ever cut a knit garment and wondered why one sleeve seems longer than the other, or why the hem doesn't quite line up, pinning could be part of the culprit. Knits don't like being restrained. They want to lie naturally, and pins tend to force them into unnatural positions. So what do you do instead? The answer is beautifully simple: weights. Rather than pinning your pattern to the fabric, you place the pattern piece on top and hold them in place with small, evenly spaced weights. Weights allow the fabric to rest flat without distortion. There's no puncturing, no pulling, and no tension introduced by pin shafts. The fabric stays exactly as it wants to be, and your pattern stays where you put it. Now, when people hear weights, they sometimes imagine specialized, expensive sewing tools. While those absolutely exist and are lovely to own, they're not required to get started. You can use just about anything with a little heft to it. Cans from your pantry work beautifully. Soup cans, vegetable cans, even unopened jars can all serve as perfectly adequate pattern weights. Small books and washers from the hardware store or smooth stones can also do the trick. The goal is simply to keep the pattern from shifting around while you cut. If you do find yourself working with knit fabrics often, investing in dedicated weights can be worthwhile. Hardware stores sell metal washers that are inexpensive, stackable, and heavy enough to hold even slinky knits in place. Craft stores also sell sewing-specific pattern weights with a variety of shapes. One thing to keep in mind, though, is protecting your fabric. Bare metal can sometimes snag delicate knits, especially if the edges aren't perfectly smooth. To avoid that, many sewists stitch small fabric pouches to hold their weights. These pouches don't need to be fancy. A simple square of scrap fabric sewn into a pocket will do. They're a great way to use up leftovers from other projects, and they add an extra layer of insurance against accidental snags or pressure marks. When laying out your pattern, start by smoothing the knit fabric flat on your cutting surface without stretching it. Let it relax naturally. Then place your pattern pieces on top, aligning grain lines or stretch direction as instructed by the pattern. Once everything is positioned correctly, place your weights around the edges of the pattern pieces. You don't need to crowd them, just enough to prevent movement when you're cutting. Pay extra attention to curves and narrow areas, as those areas are more likely to shift. When cutting, use smooth, deliberate motions rather than lifting the fabric. Keeping the fabric flat against the surface helps preserve the shape of the pieces. A rotary cutter can be especially helpful here, as it minimizes the movements compared to scissors. If you do prefer scissors, that's perfectly fine. Just be mindful to keep the blades parallel to the table and avoid lifting the fabric as you cut. The less the fabric moves, the more accurate your final pieces will be. This approach may feel slower at first if you're used to pinning everything down, but it quickly becomes second nature. Many sewists find that once they switch to weights for knits, they never want to go back. Even if you only work with knit fabrics occasionally, this small change in technique can make a big difference. It protects your fabric investment, improves the accuracy of your cuts, and reduces frustration during construction. And the beauty of it is that this tip crosses fiber boundaries. Knitters sewing garments from knit yardage or crocheters adding fabric linings and stitchers experimenting with apparel all benefit from understanding how knits behave under pressure. Working with knit fabrics doesn't have to be intimidating. With a little respect for their structure and a few thoughtful adjustments to your process, they can be some of the most rewarding materials to sew. Well, y'all, that's about it. If you've worked with knit fabrics before, let me know in the comments what your favorite trick is for keeping them under control. Happy stitching!